right? And everyone and their dog is attacking the temporary foreign workers program. And it seems like they broke immigration on purpose in order to flood our country. And it's not just here, it's happening all over the place. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. And first we have to start with the temporary foreign workers and the ongoing invasion in Canada, because this is a thing. And now it's been talked about so much by the not mainstream media that it's actually an issue, and people are actually changing policy because of it, or saying they're going to change policy. Whether they actually follow through with that promise is another thing entirely, but they're saying they will. So, hey, that's better than nothing, I guess. And so Maxime Bernier weighs in on this. It says Trudeau announces reduction in temporary foreign workers, suggests more immigration changes to come. That's, I don't know which article this is, but a CBC News article says government reviewing immigration streams amid spike in newcomer unemployment. Yeah, it's not great to be importing hundreds of thousands of people when no one can find a job and your unemployment rate keeps ticking up, right? Bernier says, so Trudeau finally woke up and just found out there's a problem with replacing Canadians with foreign workers. It took him and the fake conservative Poilievre years to realize it. In the meantime, both their corrupt parties smeared people like me and the PPC candidates who rang the alarm bell. How can you trust them to deal with issues like this that pit interests of Canadians with those of their corporate supporters who want cheap labor and with their own interests to pander to immigrant communities? You can't trust them. They will always choose their own interests until the problem is so glaring that they can't ignore it anymore. That's why you need our voice, the PPC voice, according to Bernier. And I mean, without holding a seat, the noise made by Bernier and PPC supporters has bled over. This is an issue, and not even Poilievre is really dealing with it. In fact, it seems Poilievre is more pro-immigration now than Justin Trudeau is. So isn't that weird, right? So here's True North. Jason Kenney's weighing in on this. What's your game, Jason Kenney? Former Alberta Premier and Conservative Immigration Minister Jason Kenney is attacking the federal government's handling of immigration with particular ire for its foreign labor policies. If I had my druthers and I was magically the Premier of Ontario, I would make it illegal. I would pass a sovereign Ontario within a united Canada, and then I would make it illegal for any level of government to subsidize foreign people for work. The only subsidies that would be allowed in Ontario would be for Canadian people, citizens or permanent residents, and the Canadian people would be able to access that only in certain situations to support a business or something like that, where the business would otherwise collapse, right? And not to say that I want to be doing business welfare for a long term, but you can't just turn off a program like that. You have to have a bridge situation. You have to turn it off slowly over years. You can't, if you turn it off quickly, that hurts the people in the jobs and the businesses relying on those jobs, and it might cause unintended consequences, right? So you have to turn it off in a responsible way. So but I would make changes rapidly that would prioritize Canadian workers over foreign workers. And the whole idea of, we need all these foreign workers is because we've snookered ourselves with our birth rate, and we don't have enough people becoming adults at the time when we need an increase in workers. And to fix that problem, they're saying we have to import all these workers. They're relying on models. Fundamentally, it's the same thing as the COVID models. They're relying on models to get these projections into the future. And there could be a problem. I'm not saying there's not any issues and the future is rosy and the model is 100% lie. Because, yeah, there could be an issue if you've got 100,000 elderly people or people aging into needing care in a home or something like that, and you keep the model that you have now, and that model requires, let's say, 10 workers per 100,000 or whatever it is. Like, that's probably way low, but you understand my point. And you model that into the future and you say, well, we're not going to have anywhere near that number of workers, while they're simultaneously saying all the jobs are going to be taken by AI. So there was no urgency to replace the population because we were told that robots were going to do it. Don't worry, the Jetsons is coming, right? Rosie the robot is on the way. And people were told climate change. You don't want to bring a child into this kind of world, and wars and all sorts of other stuff. It's very anti-human propaganda, and the West really listened to it because we want to be good citizens and we want to not destroy the world and all this other stuff. And we were bamboozled, and we don't want to admit we were bamboozled, but that's fundamentally what happened, right? So that's why the foreign workers are prioritized and given this status. We need you, because it looks like on the models that we need them, because if we don't have them, then all of these jobs will go unfilled and the economy will come to a grinding halt and so on and so forth. Except that what happened is they listened to the model, they imported people, they opened up the temporary foreign workers to all sorts of anybody who wanted to do it. Walmart took advantage, all sorts of businesses took advantage, MPs took advantage, everybody and their dog took advantage, and all of a sudden we've got people ticking the unemployment rate up. So coming to Canada, can't find a job, can't find a place to live because supply and demand, which again, people were saying this is not helping us, this is hurting us. And they're stuck, right? And they're stuck because of what the government has done, because of the faulty models. And that's, I mean, like, it's not good. It's very, very bad. And so these people who, I mean, Jason Kenney was the the immigration minister during his time. And so he would know, and he's tearing a strip off these people. Another guy who would know is another administrator of the program. This is Dr. Michael Bonner, and he's a writer, classicist, historian of Iran. He says, and apparently he says, many of you know that I held temporary foreign worker file in the federal government once upon a time. Nevertheless, I have usually refrained from speaking out about it since so many unpleasant memories are attached to it. I will say now that in my time, we practically forbade the use of low-wage, low-skilled immigration as a business model, which is how it's used by many nefarious actors. We argued for years that abuse of the program depressed wages and priced Canadians, especially youth, Indigenous persons, and those in remote areas out of the market. Our policy was to cap. So like in that situation, right? So what's happening is you get a temporary foreign worker. For that temporary foreign worker, the government pays 70% of the salary. So you're getting a full-time worker or a part-time worker for up to $20,000, and you're paying them like $3 an hour. Right? And the federal government's paying the rest. And that's crazy town. $3, $4 an hour, right? Of a $15, 70% of $15 is $9, something like that, roughly, maybe 10. So I'm just ballparking, but right? Like maybe I'm off, but you're getting a deal, whereas a Canadian person doesn't get that kind of deal. And so if you look at, well, I could pay this Canadian person the full amount of $15 an hour or whatever it is, or I could get this temporary foreign worker from the government and pay them $9, right? Like, or pay them $6 or whatever it is, whatever they're left over from the 70% is. So you are creating a situation, the government has created a situation where people are prioritizing these foreign workers. And I understand how it came to be, but it's ridiculous. And we should never have let it get to this. And holy smokeronis, right? Like, I think the only way to correct this is to flip it on its head, prioritize, say it's illegal in Ontario to give temporary foreign workers a subsidy. So shucks darn. But you know who you can give a subsidy to? Canadians. So if you want, right? And so then you fill those jobs at the same rate, right? With the government subsidy, and then you turn those subsidies off and allow the businesses to normalize back to a full wage payroll. Right? And like, I think that's the only way to fix it. But like at this point in time, these people are walking around like idiots, period. Okay, back to this. Oh, crud, I clicked the wrong button. So I'll back up a bit. We practically forbade the use of low-wage, low-skilled immigration as a business model, which is how it's been used by many nefarious actors. We argued for years that abuse of the program depressed wages and priced Canadians, especially youth, Indigenous persons, and those in remote areas out of the market. Our policy was to cap access to the temporary foreign worker program, to make the labor market opinion process more stringent, and to ban malefactors outright, and to publish their names on a blacklist. The Liberals attacked us for all of this, and having won the election, they expanded access to the program as never before. Will they now admit that my colleagues, my boss, and I were right? No, they won't, because they're ideologues, and they're driven to continue to expand their communist agenda. That's why they won't. That's why they won't eat crow, right? National Citizens Coalition is responding to this. It says government officers told to skip fraud prevention steps when vetting temporary foreign worker applications. Star investigation finds. So the Toronto Star did a really good investigation into these temporary foreign workers and the programs, and found that it was lacking any kind of background checks or anything like that. Measures to fast track applications resulted in fewer checks to prevent fraud. A source tells the Star the government counters it is taking concrete steps to address the fraud in the program. So that's pretty wild. National Citizens Coalition says, truly a historic betrayal of Canadian workers. They broke immigration on purpose. We'll fire them all. I mean, it doesn't sound like we're going to fire them all. It sounds like we're going to put Polly Evan there and he's going to double up immigration and put them into apartments around railway yards. So, I mean, like, it sounds super not good. Toronto Star says government officers told to skip fraud prevention steps when vetting temporary foreign workers applications. So this is the whole Star investigation. It's beyond the scope of today's show, but if you're interested, link is in the description. And yeah, like that really kind of highlights it, right? Like they were told to skip the fraud prevention steps. So this government is not acting in good faith. It is acting in bad faith in order to ideologically flood Canada with a whole bunch of foreigners, I think, personally. 6Buzz TV is reporting the same thing. Justin Trudeau announces today the federal government will reduce the number of temporary foreign workers in Canada. So here's 10 minutes of Mark Miller and Vasi Kapoulis going back and forth. Contrarian says Vasi just smashed the Canadian immigration minister. The hypocrisy and incompetence that has existed for years laid bare for all to see. This is 10 minutes. I don't really have like a damning clip or anything like that. They go back and forth. Vasi goes after him quite a lot. There's a lot of good little clips. We'll watch the first minute and a half. And again, the back and forth is worth it. There's 10 minutes if you're interested in more. Links should be in the description. Here we go.
I want to start off and ask you what the objective of these changes are, particularly with the temporary foreign worker program. Is it, for example, to address remarkably low youth employment rates? Is it more broad than that? Like, when this is fully realized, what is the goal?
Well, it is broader than that. We've seen recent youth unemployment rates jump. Earlier on this year, I announced the reduction of temporary workers in this country from 7% to 5%. What that looks like is a lot different than just temporary foreign workers. Temporary foreign workers are a very small part of that pie chart. International students, the postgraduate work permits that come with them, the humanitarian efforts that we've deployed to welcome Ukrainians here, they all form part of that category. So you can't just send people back to Ukraine and say this is all solved. We have to actually do this in a surgical way that makes sense for Canadians, but also makes sense for the economy. In the temporary foreign worker space, people working in the agricultural sector, transformation in Tim Hortons, we've seen an overheating that needs to be adjusted ever since the end of COVID. And that's something I think every Canadian expects us to do. Those numbers do affect affordability, and not all those people can become permanent residents. So the announcements that we made today, that Minister Boissonnault made today, are sort of a smart reflection of what we need to do to ramp that down back to what looks like pre-pandemic levels. It isn't the end of the story. Getting from 7% of the population to 5% is a much more significant step than that. I still have adjustments to make in the international student program. I made some significant ones in January, but it's part of a total package that we are continuing to deploy. Most measures of which will be out by the fall. The Bank of Canada said that the measures that we've taken to date are not sufficient to getting to those goals, but there are initial ones that I will announce. I took one 2 weeks ago to prevent people with labor market impact assessments that come here on visas from getting jobs. If people are here to visit, they shouldn't be working. So that's sort of some of the measures that we'll be announcing. We have announced and we'll be announcing again in the fall.
You demarcated the end of COVID, right, as a sort of a point at which things started to accelerate. Is it fair of Canadians to ask now, if you're undoing a lot of that, why the undoing didn't start earlier? Because, for example, if you look at temporary residents who hold work permits, that number has increased by 150% over 2 years. It was 60%, not just low wage, I'm speaking more broadly. It was up 60% last July, year over year. Why did your government wait until just this January to start addressing one stream of it and now to address the rest of it? And could you not have addressed things earlier in order to mitigate some of the issues your Canadians are now dealing with?
I'd say 2020 hindsight is always something we can indulge in. As a thoughtful government, you always have to reflect on what you could have done faster, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. I'd simply say this, the labor shortages that we saw even a year ago are no longer there. Markets are contracting, labor markets are contracting, and there's no longer the needs for the people that we were bringing in those amounts to be here or to come to Canada. That's just reality, and I think everyone expects governments to adjust.
Did the need exist a year ago? Are you asserting that it did?
It's very possible in some areas it did. I think now it's quite obvious that we do have to adjust.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it did. Six Buzz again says, Quebec Premier Francois Legault says if tomorrow morning those 300,000 non-permanent residents were not here, we would not have a housing crisis. Well, that's something. That's something. Darshan says, I believe that Pierre Poilievre and the CPC is falling behind the curve on the issue of the rampant fraud in Lima temporary foreign worker file. They should have come out swinging 2 weeks ago when the Bloomberg report was published. Today's expose in the Star is their last chance. And silence. Crickets. I don't have a temporary foreign worker file anything from Pierre Poilievre as far as I see, really, or any kind of conservatives. It's crickets, right? And so what's her name? Michelle Rempel Garner used to really talk up the temporary foreign worker file, and she really loved her acronyms. So she'd like use TFWP and blah, 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 blah. And she said to somebody, if you don't know what that is, you should be speaking politics. I was like, how can you speak to constituents like that? You should be educating them, not be talking down to them. I digress. She blocked me after that. But regardless, it's a mess. Where's the Conservative Party? It's because they're going to continue doing the policy, and the policy's crap, and it should be turned on its head. And you could turn it on its head in the provinces. You could say, nope, we're not going to do this anymore. It's illegal in Ontario to do that. So if your federal law interferes with Ontario law, I'm going to use the notwithstanding clause and prioritize Ontario law. Also, here's the sovereign Ontario within a united Canada, and we're not going to put up with your bullshit anymore. How about that? Holly Doan says, let's move on to the invasion. Cabinet this fall, for the first time, will detail the true number of foreigners allowed into Canada, says Justin Trudeau. Follows May 21st report by Senate Social Affairs Committee that complained actual counts are misrepresented in Parliament. So the number of people who are coming into Canada is not represented accurately in Parliament, and they use that misleading number to continue to pack people in, right? It's like a train in an Asian place during rush hour, right? So Japan? Probably Japan. Dr. Mike Moffat is sharing his own tweet. He says, in the last 3.5 years, our population has grown more than it did in the decade from 1991 to 2000, but we've built 900,000 fewer homes. That's the hole we've dug ourselves into just 42 months. And so, yeah, pretty wild. 1991 to 2000 population growth, 2,967,378, and then 2021 to 2024, that's 3.5 years, there have been 2,985,157. So more by almost 10,000 people. Holy smokeronis. And the total housing starts are minus 892,000, almost 900,000 less than we had during the 10 years of 10 years of immigration during the 90s, right? That's incredible. That's really bad, right? And Mike Moffat says, I'm still stunned by this stat. In the last 3.5 years, our population has grown faster than it did in the entire decade from 1991 to 2000, but we built almost 900,000 fewer homes. And the 90s were the worst post-war decade for home building. So, yowza, that's pretty incredible. So, not great. All of the numbers stacking up, not good. Payman is using this quote, and I guess he's attributing this to Harrison Faulkner. He's attributing this to Harrison Faulkner. It doesn't sound like Harrison Faulkner to me, and I think that Harrison Faulkner sits face to cam, he doesn't do this. So maybe this is actually him saying this. I don't know. It's credit for Bernier, who's been talking about this kind of stuff and basically saying that the presence of the PPC has pushed the Overton window. I think it's true. I think it's an interesting statement. Here we go.
Who has put in effort and time to raise the serious issues that we have seen with permanent residency numbers, with international students and temporary foreign workers, to recognize that pressure has paid off. It is working, it is breaking through, and it is resulting in public policy shift. It might not be exactly what everybody wants right now, but it is working, and it has been accomplished without any help, really, from the conservative establishment. And I think that today and yesterday, especially the comments we heard from Justin Trudeau and Mark Miller, it should be real vindication to Maxime Bernier and PPC voters and supporters and those that have been along since the beginning to recognize that they were the only people speaking about this issue before it was politically popular. And it is possible to actually influence public policy on this. And it looks like it's happening now.
So, I mean, that's certainly interesting, and they're speaking out about it, and that's something, and it is influencing things, and that's credit where it's due. James Lindsay says, so weird that it's happening all over the world, not China, all at once. Klaus says, Spanish government is shutting down an entire airport to exclusively fly African immigrants into Spain. Using taxpayer money, the government is flying immigrants from the Canary Islands into mainland Spain and directly into hotels. This is treason. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean for it to yell like that. I don't know. It kind of made me jump, actually. So I don't know why we tolerate this. It seems strange to tolerate this, but here's a huge lineup of people. I don't know why it has to be the weird music like that. There's a huge lineup of people waiting to go into Spain, and like, if you have politicians who are doing that under the guise of temporary foreign workers or whatever it is. Well, that seems crazy town, doesn't it? Like, that seems crazy to me. That seems like not a really good idea. That seems like a bad idea, a very bad idea. So I don't know how exactly to stop it. The more local, the better. The smaller, the better, I think. Because right now, the globalists have control of the municipality. They have control of the school boards. They have control of the province and the country, like federals too. So fixing it is small moves, right, in little jurisdictions, but we're having our money wasted on pride crosswalks and all sorts of nonsense, while drug deaths, overdose deaths, et cetera, are ticking up, and nobody's fixing any of these policies. But if there's a job that needs doing, we've got to go to sub-Saharan Africa and report and import somebody to do that job ASAP, and that's super efficient. We can get that done. Right? Like, that seems crazy. Concerned citizen again. He says, should Canada follow this, or should we continue to remain tolerant and accepting of diverse cultures? Your thoughts on this emotional, if not polarizing issue? Denmark bans the burqa, tells Muslims to adjust to their culture or face legal consequences or leave the country. So what do you think? There is an argument that could be made, I think. Personally. Economic Woes shares this. I told you all we were in a silent depression in Canada. Even realtors want the news to shush up. So here she is talking about the state of the real estate market in Canada. I just finished reading this blog. It's too quiet. It's too quiet. Sorry. Give me half a second here. We'll respond.
Just finished reading this blog TO article, and it pointed out various homes that are being sold across the GTA at a significant loss than what they were purchased for. But I couldn't help imagine buying your first time home and having to sell it at a huge loss 2 years later due to current economic conditions. And on top of that, having it rubbed in your face on the news constantly. All I can think about are these families that are currently going through this situation, and maybe as realtors and as newscasters, we should stop promoting all of these losses and mind our own business. Anyway, on the bright side of this article, the Canadian Real Estate Association is forecasting that these homes will start to rebound and we will have renewed energy in the real estate market post rate cuts. I just finished.
There is supposed to be a rate cut today. Actually, they're talking about the third rate cut in a row because I guess they're panicking because people are losing their houses. And like, not great, but don't worry, there's going to be a program for people who can't afford their houses and who aren't Canadian, who will be able to get 0% and $150,000 loans. Oh, sorry, that's California. Not in Ontario yet, but coming soon if it's up to Doug Ford, I'm sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful